My name is Brianna Robinson. I'm 13 years old.
My name is Maurice, and I'm 17.
Hi, I'm Chloe Robinson, and I'm 15.
My name's Amani. I'm 21.
My name's Alina Cradle Morgan. I am 22 years old.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
So I just want to know, do you have any knowledge or any stories of your own about, do you know about the BRC and the history of the Brownsville Boys Club or the community center control movement at all?
I would say no, it's not my area of expertise. But there's some brilliant people that I think were advocating for that decades past because they knew that it was needed for community revitalization and to curb public safety issues in the community. Might have been, I don't want to lie, but there was definitely a document that was written in 1940 called Brownsville Must Have Public Housing. And in that document, it was by a Brownsville council, community council that was requesting certain social goods and services that would promote public safety and public health for residents. And because of that document, things like the BRC were created, and we got a large amount of public housing as well because of that. So that was in 1940.
Hello. Okay, so the first question is, what is your name and if you like your age?
My name is Olivia Taylor, and I love my age.
How would you define activism?
My definition of activism is being in a community, or in a school, or in a church, wherever you be, and you see something that needs to be done that promotes the collective good, and you set about motion to make it happen. You see a problem and you reach out for others to help to solve it.
Hello. The first question I have for you is, what is your name and your age if you'd like to tell us?
My name is Rochelle Rodney and I'm 25 years old.
Okay. How would you define activism?
So activism to me is finding a cause that you care about and making sure that, it's so funny, finding a cause that you care about and creating a change surrounding an issue that you find with that cause. So for me, it's reproductive health. I'm invested in increasing reproductive health access across New York State. So I found different ways to alleviate the access, to create access for birth control and reproductive health for New Yorkers. And that is a cause that I'm an activist for. So activism is really just finding a problem and a cause that you care about and figuring out how to solve it and showing up and doing the work.
The first question I have for you is, what is your name? And if you would like to tell us your age.
My name is Kathy Ray Lewis. I'm 65 in a couple of weeks.
And I'm Cheryl Monifa Edwards, and I just turned 68 on Saturday past.
Okay, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. What is activism to you?
To me, activism is movement, being involved in your community, paying attention to what's going on, and making sure that you're on the right side. You know, we don't live alone, so your neighbors is very important to you. I'm sure you have neighbors that you're living with, people who are, like-minded and care about the community too. So when we get involved, we're getting involved for ourselves, for our families, and the people and all our neighbors.
I totally agree with that. I'll add that I feel that activism is about paying attention, because you just never know what's going to happen. I make the joke that if I realized how important the school strikes and that whole era was going to be, I would have paid more attention and I would have remembered more. But I was really blessed because I've been journaling since I was 12 years old. So activism is also keeping that information.
Chris Banks is the newly formed council district for the 42nd.
Council actually won the Democratic primary out in the 42nd Councilman District, which represents East New York, Brownsville, Canarsie, Remsen Village, and a small portion of Brownsville. I think what you're doing is amazing. It's important. I just wanted to come and let you know, see somebody at least not your age, but someone not too far. I'm actually about to be 40. So it's important to let folks see that there are young folks that are doing stuff. And I think one of the key things we need to stress is also the importance to let you know that, listen, it's okay to be productive. It's okay to get involved in your community. After you go to school, get your education, come back and take control of your community. Don't just get what you can and disappear. Because communities like East New York, Brownsville, they need folks like you to invest back in it. Because that has to be the understanding. Because that's how we keep the village going. That's how we empower our community. That's how we keep this strong legacy going of a lot of our ancestors or the folks who paved the way for us. We only as strong once we get back to that village. And get involved. Get involved with your local community boards, precinct community councils, block association. I started off as a block association president of Van Sickling between New Lots and Eggerman. I started organizing. And I've done a host of other stuff. I did a lot of social justice work. Been out to Jefferson with Mike Brown, with Floyd, went out to Minnesota, protested, got arrested, did things that to kind of awaken the consciousness of this nation. And then came back after I did that stuff, and came back to my neighborhood and still saw the need to serve and run for public office because I felt there was a need for new leadership. Sometimes you still have to push forward, stay focused. I ran against my opponent 5 times, and I started running when I was 26. And I beat
That's important because when he first started running at 25, there's a lot of elders in our community told him he needed to sit down and learn this role. Right? And then there was other elders said, "Bro, you need to learn the roles, but there's a way that you need to do the work." So within those 5 years, he's been a strong community person around seniors in our community. Yeah. A lot of the senior services in Brownsville, East New York, he was able to bring in, right? Without even being in the elected office, but the goal was to serve the community. And I commend him, because I was one of the people that's telling him, you need to go get 5,000, 10,000 people. You really want to do this, and you need to go do some work. And as he said, his resume is extensive. Right? And not just doing it because sometimes people get in this for the goods and the gold and all that, but he really been showing that he wanted to do something for the community. And he's a supporter empowering youth all that time. So the college students, raise your hand. So this is another one person, when we was doing those care packages, he gave back.
Being focused, don't get caught up on the glam, the cameras, that stuff will come. But if you're dedicated to your community, no matter how many times you may fall down, get back up.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brianna. So the first question is, what is your name, and if you like to say with your age?
My name is Miriam Robertson. Well, let's change that. That's Miriam B. Robertson. I am the executive director of Brownsville Heritage House, and I am 57.
Okay, so what would you define as activism?
Activism is when you are a part of the community and you want to make changes in your community. So you look at something that's going wrong, or you would like to make better as far as quality of life, rather than maybe you want more security in your community, or you want more resources in your community. When I say resources, meaning like maybe better food stores, or either better childcare, health doctors in your community. You want to make your community a place that you want to not only just live there, but you want to really call home because everything's at your fingertips.
First, I just have you like introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about the work that you've done, particularly with the New York Historical Society. And I know that you also do work within the church, so just learning more about that.
Let's start with exactly what you just said, who I am. I'm Mia Michelle. I am a public historian and a curator by trade. I appreciate culture and all the aspects of public history and what that entails. So that's really more so like everything outside of academia, outside of the collegiate classroom that you'll get. So that goes from documentaries, docuseries, conversation, oral history, live events, things of that nature. Of course, collecting objects, artifacts, to tell the history of human beings, which is literally history. So I started out a long time ago, I'd say my sophomore year of high school. I went to high school out in Queens at St. John's University. Sorry, not university, St. John's Prep. Went to St. John's Prep. And there I pretty much started to kind of discover more history about marginalized people, which was something completely different outside of the global region. So the US history regions that we learn. And that's where my like interest started gravitating to. So that led me down a path of, okay, I like history, but I don't want to be a teacher. So fast forward, I went to college up in Massachusetts at Worcester. It's now Worcester University. When I was there, it was Worcester. I'm sorry, Assumption College is now Assumption University. When I was there was only 9% of us who were of color. And that's such a broad range. There was only 99% out of the entire population of the campus. When I graduated, it was only 13%, so a small increment, but it definitely grew, and you can sense the shift and more minorities wanting to come to campus. So I had a play in that, which I'm proud to say. Before I was a little bit timid about it because, you know, it's not something to brag about, because I'm ashamed that my alma mater had such a low, representation of us. That's really where the shame comes from. But proud to say that I was at least influential in the movement to getting us, more of us, to go to the college. So what I did was, one, I was the community outreach coordinator for the Alana Network, and that stands for Asians, Latinos, African Americans, Native Americans. So it's saying Alana is ALANA. Yes, so we're pulling from the memory bank. I'm sorry, pulling for the memory bank. So yeah, I was their outreach person, so coordinator and what have you. And I just saw a need, like the Worcester community, the inner city children. I didn't see a bridge where they were going to the colleges that we were going to in Worcester, or going to college at all. So that's where the outreach that I started, where that began. So that was a really grand experience for me. Then fast forward to my next year, which would be my junior year in college, I became the president. And that's a huge leap, but I was ambitious, so I went for it. And I love to make effective change. So now we're president, and I realized there was no Black history event, representation, mention. I was just like, whoa, this is like, that's a big deal for me back at home. How can I just be here not representing this holiday? Well, not holiday, but this celebration of my culture and history and heritage. So I created the first exhibit and first Black History Month celebration. So I use a tangible skill that I have, which again is curating. And I curated a Black history show, which was more of a reenactment of a timeline. So we started from enslavement, and then we went forward up until Trayvon Martin. That was the year of when Trayvon Martin was murdered. So yeah, we transformed the eatery, the main hall, and we had people reenacting as Frederick Douglass. We had people reenacting as Sojourner Truth. It was a lot of different representations. I had a lot of people really come out and want to show Black culture and Black history. We ran it back the next year. We did it again, which made it an annual event. It was such a hit. Everyone loved it. We had poetry. It got bigger the next year. So that was like my strong impact. My other impact in college was I created the step team. I had to put a little bit of flavor in those basketball games because the go team go, that was a little boring for me. So I had to so I brought a little bit of flavor to it. I'm sorry, I have to bring my personality.
Awesome. Yeah.
The Historical Society. And the New York Historical Society, I got to learn a lot. And that's where I kind of discovered exactly what was happening to my community and to my people. I came home in the height of gentrification. It was a bit of a shock when I came back to Harlem and to New York in general and seeing the grave change. Like I wasn't prepared for that. I'm not gonna lie. And it did something to my spirit. I was reading a book called Vanishing New York. It really put the motor in my engine to just keep going and to do something about it, and to not lose the culture that I grew up with. Right, I grew up with a very heavy culture-filled community that I saw dwindling and dying. I created an exhibit titled Beyond the Pulpit, and what that was for my church to really revive the collective memory of what this pulpit, it was our former pulpit, but we have it encased now. And it's on show, it's on display, it's still there. It's a permanent exhibit. That's one of my grave achievements. Yes, it's still there. And pretty much the history behind it was all those who spoke from the pulpit. And the call to action was, what is your pulpit and what can you do in your own community to really revive the history and heritage and culture to keep us going, keep us strong, so that we don't die and we don't lose our history. So there are names like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Hillary Clinton, Ed Koch, the list goes on of all the names that have spoken from that pulpit, which is monumental, yet it's still alive today, which is why I titled the exhibit Beyond the Pulpit. So you can speak from the pulpit, yes, but what goes beyond that is the work that we do, which brings me to finally the advocacy that I do. So again, my focus is sincerely on heritage and preserving heritage in all ways, all aspects. I'm not geographically married to Harlem. I've done an exhibit on East Elmhurst. A lot of folks don't know about the Black history and culture of East Elmhurst as it still is today. That's a misnomer, that it actually still is. It's a home ownership, Black thriving neighborhood, Black ownership, Black businesses. During this time, we're talking about the greats used to live in East Elmhurst, jazz musicians, baseball players, even Malcolm X, activists. So this is all the type of work that I did. That exhibit I did with the East Elmhurst Community School out in Queens. And then now we're gonna bring it back to Brooklyn, and why I was really interested in joining this project, because I am currently in the works of interviewing various former Black Panthers, and a few are from Brownsville. I have a couple of interviews lined up, and I'm really excited about it to just get everyone's story, because what I've learned and discovered is that it wasn't a linear experience for everyone. Many people had different roles, and I'm very keen on the underdog in history. So yes, George Washington and fought on the front lines, but what about the little lady who might have made his musket balls that was helpful in him being able to, win the war or what have you. So I would say right now, that's the exhibit that I'm working on next. I'm working on creating my own virtual museum, catered to and representing marginalized people. I don't like to talk, but you got me to talk. And I did it. I'm happy. I actually was able to make sense of all my jumbled ideas in my head and my past history.
That was beautiful. You curated that story so well. I mean, that's flawless, like from beginning to end. And I mean, you're so dope. Like that is so like I didn't know about East Elmhurst. I was writing down Vanishing New York because I didn't know about that book. So I'm absorbing here.
Yes, absolutely. I will mention one thing only because it's a little sensitive, and I want to shed light on it.
What happened?
Back in 2019, I met my mentor, who was the borough historian emeritus from Manhattan. He was a Black man by the name of Cal Jones. He was in his 90s. He was extremely influential. In fact, he did a lot of the dirty work in discovering the names of the families, the churches, and schools that resided in Seneca Village, which was in Central Park. That was the Black community that was destroyed because of the formation of Central Park.
Right.
I just want to make mention of that only because he actually recently just passed back in April, and I just found out about it, unfortunately. So it's a little fresh on me, and I realized I was like, wow, he's left me with a huge shoes to fill. And I'm definitely going to continue that work. So right now, as we speak, I'm in the process of creating a standardized tour for people to, discover what else is there to learn about Seneca Village and what you can retain and take back home to your communities.
Wow, you just keep getting more awesome as you talk. Like it's just
no, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that I definitely shed light on Mr. Cal Jones because he's near and dear to me, but he's also near and dear to our culture and in general. His whole bread and butter was we have these resources of the city, go to the Hall of Records, and you can go and discover all that you want about Black history. The misnomer is that there's no findings of Black history, what have you. But if we do the work in very specialized ways, then we can actually discover and find out a lot.
No, awesome. I took his name down along with your exhibit in Harlem.
Yeah.
Beyond the pulpit, as well as like the East Elmhurst. So I hope to take this back to my youth participants and like also expose them, at least, even if they don't die fully, but expose them to what you're showing me now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't even know about him. So there we go.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why I'm like, I'm gonna scream his name until I can't scream anymore because
that is beautiful.
He's actually reached out to the ancestors of the family. He's gone out to California and have found the great grandchild who's still alive of Seneca Village. That's huge, monumental.
That is, and I wish the best of luck in all those endeavors. So what is your connection to Brownsville? I know you guys had the space on Belmont Avenue. So like, what led to your work with Youth Design Center and in Brownsville and with Brownsville Youth?
So for me, it started with kind of like my lived experience growing up in Brownsville, as well as the act of deeply listening to community members to understand, what some of the challenges, particularly around public safety, were for folks. And a lot of what I heard was, youth programs were underfunded. There weren't any vocational programs and training programs for workforce development for young people. And maybe the ones that were here, at some point, the funding dries up. The people who run those organizations aren't from this place. And so the investment wasn't consistent. And then that leads to, a gap in service provision for the community. I took an interest in architecture at a young age because, my block in Brownsville was beautiful. It's on Howard Avenue. It's a planted median, a gazebo, and a metal turtle, and all those kind of things. And those experiences, are really about place making that lead to kind of like genuine, heartfelt memories of a place, particularly for young people growing up. And I think more broadly in the community, there are little pockets of that happen that aren't really spoken about and shared. We don't get to tell our stories and say the things that, people say about you often and repeatedly are what you become. And, I think that the story, it wasn't told from our perspective very often in media. And so harnessing that narrative became important to me. And so the work of creating youth design. So the work of creating Youth Design Center came from, it was initially made in Brownsville, right? Like making something that was indicative of what I knew was possible and already happening from the creative young people, particularly that exist in Brownsville. But giving a space for education and apprenticeship, particularly to highlight the products of Brownsville youth, was a part of the initial impetus. And then growing that into a creative agency where clients can come to us for design services and needs, and we're able to respond to those needs with freelance alumni that have been trained and employed to work on those projects, to build their portfolios, to deal with larger issue of diversity in design and tech professions, which I had noted after 7.5 years of college and grad school at SUNY Buffalo and at Harvard, and working in the architecture profession for some time. So,
what kind of activism do you do?
I have retired from much of the activism I have done, but collectively now I still work with young people. I work as a volunteer with the safety net hospitals, and I'm active with Heritage House. But being retired, you're generally called on to submit and give time to many projects that are going on.
How do you feel about the activism that you did slash doing it? The
activism that I did, we did not have cell phones. But we were able to mobilize and organize just as quickly as you are with cell phones today. You would do a thing that we say someone had a problem, and you might be, my concentration at that time was education. But if something was going on and you needed people to show up, although they knew you were in education, you were reliable, and we need bodies on the line, you put out a call. It might be for somebody who's working on a housing project. It might be for somebody who's strapped. It might be somebody trying to get more black people into construction. Whatever it is, you showed up. I grew through my activism with education. I was called on to write a book about parents' involvement by Kenneth Clark. And Kenneth Clark is the person that did the Brown baby. I don't know if you've known of it, but Brown versus the Board of Education was the case that broke segregation in schools. And it began to do, and he began to use black dolls to demonstrate that black children who are taught an inferior education began to be inferior about themselves and hate the fact that they were black. If they were asked the prettiest doll, they always put the white doll over the black doll. I had been active in Brownsville, East New York in education, been on vacation, and I got a call from Kenneth Clark's office to write up my activism.
How did they feel about your activism? Like, were they proud of you for like almost following in their footsteps?
Well, activism and one person has an idea means something. You might go to bed and wake up. You have to organize. My first sense of organizing in the school, we were part of a local block association. When we moved into a community, it was predominantly white and mostly Jewish. It's a mixture of everybody in East New York. But within 2 years, once black people began to move in that community, and hardworking black people, the rumor was out that your property is going to be defaced, and they started redlining the area. So once the area got redlined, within a course of 3 years, it flipped to be Black and Latino. And one of the reasons is because the apartments were a lot of 3-bedroom apartments. People who were coming up from the South, people had large families. The first step we was going to get is that we had a lot of Puerto Rican people. We didn't right away get teachers of all colors into the school, but we made a demand on those that were there that you had to want to teach. And we did immediately get what was called, I'm going to say, a bilingual person. I don't exactly remember the title, because we had so many Latino parents who were first generation that did not speak English at all. And sometimes they would have to have, the child would find themselves interpreting my behavior to the parent. And so I'm going to say a bilingual coordinator. That was the first activist thing that we accomplished with a bilingual person.
That's excellent. What inspired you to start doing activism / your job?
I started doing activism because I was a part of an internship program called Protecting the East, located in East New York, Brooklyn. And we were going into the community teaching about STI and HIV prevention. And the STI rates were really high, and unintended pregnancy rates were high in East New York, Brooklyn at that time. And a way to alleviate that was joining that cause and becoming an activist for safe sex and reproductive health and justice as a whole. And it was because of that internship about 8 years ago, actually, that I started the job that I'm at right now. I came on as the advocacy associate for under a 6-month contract. And because I did so well, they continued to keep me, and now I'm the director of advocacy. And it's because my previous director, Deidre Miller, who still works at Protecting the East, she sent along the job application to me and said, hey, like, I think this is perfect for you. This is exactly what you've been wanting to do. I applied and I got the job. So that also shows that staying connected and networking is important when it comes to activism.
Were your parents involved with any sort of activism as well?
No, I don't think anyone in my family that I know of has done like activism work before. It was just like a me thing. My mom does healthcare work. She's always been into healthcare, and yeah. And my dad is also in healthcare as well. So maybe there's a trend there.
So they're supportive of what you do, like your activism?
Yes, I think that they're definitely more so definitely supportive, but very, very proud to see like the level of activism that I'm doing, because I started doing like community-based activism, and now the activism that I do impacts over 1 million people across New York State, and just New York State as a whole, because I now work on policy implementation and creation of laws, and advocating for different laws to get passed. And now it's just like a macro stage instead of micro. And I think they're just like really proud and definitely supportive because they want to continue to see me do well.
What inspired you to do the activism that you do?
Well, I was inspired initially as a little 10-year-old girl. I mean, probably more when I was 9. We lived in Van Dyke, and then they built Central. My mother had 5 kids. We only had 2 bedrooms. We needed more space. So we moved to Central as soon as it opened. And when we started going to the community center there, the people who, I had no idea who they were at the time. As I got older, I realized I was molded by some revolutionaries. I mean, people that you've heard of, Murray Baraka, he's an amazing poet. He had people who he taught, and the person he taught who was doing a lot of community work and a lot of drama, a lot of artistry. This was the arts movement was starting, you know, so I ended up being in the middle of the arts movement, and we were protesting, but we were doing it through drama, doing it through dance, doing it through singing. So we sang and danced all over the city, you know, put on plays from all over the city. These people were amazing. Mr. Washington, whose name, well, it was Paul Washington back then, And Ms. Moore, who became Imani, who's still alive, by the way, and she's amazing, and she just swooped us all up and made sure she got people to teach us dance and drama and all these different things. So when we started hearing about what was going on in the community, they kept us informed, and they let us know right then, you're important. Your voice is important now. And whenever there was a march, whenever there was a rally, we were going up there. So when school stopped, because school stopped for how many months? We didn't go back to school till like November, right? We didn't go back to school till November. So the community got together to make sure, the kids were somewhere being productive. We were in the center. So they became my regular teachers. And we learned our history. We learned things you would have never learned in school, And so that changes you. I had been bused to a white school where they were telling us, well, they didn't even acknowledge us half the time. Or they were protesting about us being there, and you sat in the back of the room and you held your hand up, but they didn't let you answer any questions, and you better get 100 on every test, because otherwise they're going to find a reason to put you in special ed. That was how it was, so we certainly weren't learning anything, we learned the basics, but we didn't learn anything about ourselves. When I came home, I was empowered, by these beautiful people who taught me who I was. They were the first ones to say, who all the African leaders were, and who people we had. I've never heard of Herodotus or any of these people they brought up, and we were like, wow, so it changed us. That's when we started changing our hair. I didn't want my hair straightened anymore, I wanted an afro, I wasn't, I became a little radical, but we marched, we walked. So they were inside the school, we were outside the school, with our picket signs. So it made me who I am, it molded me, because you don't forget that, and once you're aware and you're conscious, you become part of the conscious, people in society. Some people don't want to be conscious, they want to walk around and not know what's going on. I started then, I needed to know. When I knew I had to fight for my education, and the education of not just myself, everybody, all my peers.
Okay, so what kind of activism have you done?
Well, currently I'm a resident association president of where I live at, and we had a lot of issues with maintenance. So back this past April, I set up a team of cohorts to go around, about 8 people, and I have obviously about 450 residents. So what we did, we set up a survey to ask what's going on in your apartment, and that survey included issues that you have, maintenance issues. Do you have mold, leak? Do you find security? It was just a survey, maybe about 8, 9 questions. So we knocked on everybody's doors. We met with upper management. So just to let you know, I live in NYCHA. So back on June 13th, after we completed part of the survey, we had about maybe at that point, we had gotten about maybe 100 people out of the 400. And on June 13th, we met with upper management of NYCHA. We presented our survey, which was broken down into categories, and they made our development a priority for during the month of, and which it still is. So out of that, at the end of the day, I think we collected about 140 residents surveys. Out of it was about, well, at the end we did a kindness party to say thank you for your support and let's keep this relationship going on. So from June 13th until now, they fixed over 1,600 maintenance issues that were actually closed and fixed.
What does advocacy mean to you? Are those different when it comes to organizing? And just what does your activism look like to you, like on a personal note?
Okay, thank you. That's actually a great question. I'm gonna rewind a little bit. Back in 2020, it was pretty much in our faces. Activism was in action, right? And especially because we were on lockdown, right? And we had time, especially with the killing of George Floyd. So many might have gone out and picketed, many might have boycotted XYZ companies, or many might have done, in different ways, whatever they have done, they've done it, I hope. I would say for me, my activism has a lot to do with education. It has a lot to do with demystifying a lot of things that was told to us that is normal, that is told to us that is the truth. That those are the type of things that I really picked up the mantle. I was like, wait, I don't understand. Like, I wasn't getting fulfillment from going out and shouting in the streets and, you know, going on marches and what have you. That is fine and dandy. That is fulfilling. It's great. I've done it plenty of times with different organizations throughout my lifetime. But I realized that activism is an action word and you have to do something. And it has to go beyond just the benefits of self. So when I hear what does activism mean to me, it strongly means that my reach. Am I effectively reaching people? Am I effectively sending people? Not only am I educating people, but am I also igniting them to do something to effectively change what's our reality right now? And like I say, it's my tool to use exhibits, and exhibits are sometimes I actually forgot to tell you this. Exhibits are again not linear. So you can of course go to the Brooklyn Museum and go see Jay-Z and fan out and be like, wow, Death for Auto Tunes was great, or wow, Jay-Z has done so much incredible things through the years. That is an exhibit. That is effective. That is great. But I want to reach the RN who just got off work. I want to reach the bus driver who just got off work. I want to reach the postman who just got off work or is on work. So there's various ways that you can still present an exhibit without it being an exhibit. And one of the things that I'm currently doing right now is my father, he has a radio show on Harlem Radio. It's a Harlem Radio network. It's called WACR. And his show is titled Sunday Night Inspirations, and his whole thing is music with a message. And he gives me about 10 minutes. I'm really supposed to have 5, but he gives me 10. Once I get into something, I get into it, right? So he gives me 10 minutes to it's called the P segment. And in the P segment, I choose like a psychiatrist, a pianist. One time I did a pastor. I do various different types. Definitely pioneers, do a lot of pioneers. Oh. And I do that because it's so how I do it is I will take, let's say my last one I just did was the Jubilee Singers from Fisk University, our first African-American college in this country. They were a group that was able to actually sing to raise money to build their school. And that's a P. And you see that reaction? That's the reaction I go for. I'm not gonna take 4 hours to give you a dissertation about this group, but guess what? They were able to make change using the means that they had, right? Or a pastor or what have you, or a physician, right? I even discussed the first Black physician. His name is James McCune Smith. First Black physician from Brooklyn, James McCune Smith. All right. So basically, so what I do is take really, really fun and engaging facts about our culture, about our history. And like I said, it's just a way to educate our people, because the more you know, the more you'll do and the better we'll be. And that's what I hope for our society, that we can, these small increments can really get us to places where our ancestors would have never dreamed of. So that's like what I think activism is. It's definitely being active. It has to be alive. And what I do is it's every week. I'm on the radio, definitely educating, teaching folks about our history. That is activism and its breath and its life. Besides that, I of course do these exhibits. That's really draining. It's hard work, but it's worth it. So I curate my shows on Sunday nights. I curate exhibits online. I do oral history projects. I keep these things alive. I do actively educate our youth so that they know about them and that they have the tools to go out and use their own gifts to be able to educate someone else.
So I'm gonna ask my first question is, how do you define activism?
I think activism is the act of kind of like deeply listening and understanding where the gaps are, and finding the appropriate voices to solve for those gaps. And, it's not, there are advocates, there are people that are allies, and I think that those two things, we need to kind of like hold them separately and understand their roles in both, because not always can an ally be the best advocate for, a hyper-local issue or community, right? And the best advocate is someone who has a deep and personal relationship with the problem that they're trying to solve for. And I think that that ties into the power of narrative, like someone's narrative. People were able to trust me, for instance, to start an organization in my community because I have that lived experience coming from this neighborhood of Brownsville, and an understanding through conversations with my neighbors about what it is that we need most and what isn't being solved for. And so I think advocacy then becomes the act of engaging in the public discourse that promotes the thing that you're trying to solve for. And it has various forms. I think creatives have a really powerful role in advocacy. The simplest way to envision that is like creatives make posters, and you're going on a picket line, or you're a banner that goes in when people are doing a march to advocate for something, right? Like creative people are often making those things, and you don't even need to be that creative. We make creative decisions. We make 1,000 creative decisions every day, but at the core of it, art is really tied in to advocacy, right? If you want a community center in your community, right, a designer, an architect has to design that, and it's used as a tool to advocate for the development of that community center in your community. So they really do, for me, art and advocacy go hand in hand.
So would you consider like your work with the youth and like Youth Design Center and like your coalitions that you are part of with activism and your own and in that way?
Absolutely. I think the work that we do has various aspects of advocacy. One, the core mission of increasing diversity in design and technology professions. We're advocating for the creative talent that lives here in the spaces where they are underrepresented. And so that mission-driven work is a core kind of like advocacy component of what we do every day. And then in the creative agency where we have, or another program that we call YDC EDU, where partners come to us with really creative, great projects that our alumni can work on. There are these great ideas around placemaking or placekeeping that have come up that we've been able to work on with community groups. And so I can point to specific projects like the Brownsville anti-violence campaign, which was branded Brownsville Stronger Together, that we worked on with Brownsville Community Justice Center, where a group of young people essentially created a business around this anti-violence campaign with products that were branded around this Brownsville Stronger Together slogan, that like wristbands and shirts, and there was a mural that was put on the wall with Brownsville Stronger Together on just off of Belmont Avenue on the side of Seatown. And there was a mural on the ground where what is now Osborne Plaza, which was just a dead-end street before, but those young people advocated for a higher use of that space as a plaza, pedestrian zone, where cars could not park any longer, and occupying it with furniture, and this kind of a beautiful mural that read out Brownsville Stronger Together, so that it raised awareness, particularly around the space of contention between two feuding housing zones, right? Like, this is a safe space. This is a zone of, squashing the beef and coming together, unifying the community. So the friendship benches that the Department of Health funded with Brownsville Community Justice Center, that went on that plaza. Later on, there was a project called the Healing Spaces, that folks could, immerse themselves in these floating boxes, essentially, that took you to a different environment, that were really around kind of self-reflection, meditation, and there were activities around those healing spaces, like Reiki, and things that were offered to the public, to kind of create a moment of Zen, in the middle of Brownsville, which I think are advocating for public things like the mental health of residents, their safety, well-being, and encouraging public health activities and public activity just generally.
When is the time that you ever felt powerless?
On the job?
Well, like in just general, like whenever you ever felt powerless?
That's a really good question. I think I'm gonna relate it back to the work just to like keep the theme. But I think a time while doing the work that I felt powerless was when we were working to pass something called the Birth Control Access Act for New York State. And we realized, we as in my executive director and I realized that activists have been working to pass it for about 5 years. And we were stuck doing research on the policy and what other states were doing for about 2 years. And we were actively trying to get the law passed and it wasn't working. So we continuously had to change our logistical approach of like, how do we talk to the senators? How do we talk to assembly members? And I felt powerless because the law wasn't being passed and we were getting paid to get the law passed and it wasn't happening. But this year we were finally able to get the law passed and we found a model that worked. So I feel like going through the process of like trying really hard to make something happen and having like grant funders and people that are supporting your project wanting to see that happen and it's not happening, it's like a powerless feeling because you're trying, but the methods that you're trying aren't working. So
my rapid question to all the people we're interviewing is, EYTE, we have certain sayings we say to the youth. Mr. Johnson, what he says, stay focused and drink water, so we always have like these little tokens. Like this summer, it's creativity and encouraging creativity and movement in young people. So do you have like a token or a saying that you like to pass down to the youth or the youth in Brownsville?
I would say dream big, right? Like the sky is the limit. Don't be limited by what you think you can accomplish. Know that you can accomplish more.
You might learn from me, but I would also learn from you. And we can't close that out. And the greatest person who ever taught, I've heard repeat that in a public forum, is the great Ella Jo Baker. And you might have heard of SNCC. John Lewis is recent. You might know John Lewis. But those students who came up through SNCC, I can't do what you can do unless I think I'm a fool. I have far more time behind me than I have in front of me. And so I have to trust learning from you. Because you're going to bring forth the next generation. And you may not have thought about having a job. But it's you. My generation can't have no more children. So I think it's a matter of listening and respecting what you say. Not listening in a condescending way. Because I think I have as much to learn from you as you may have to learn from me.
So given your experience and everything that you've learned during your journey with your activism, what would be something that you would tell a younger generation based on what you've learned?
Learn about policy. I think that in high schools, or I attended Family Academy in East New York, Brooklyn, and even when I was in college, I only took one policy class, and I think that the government does not push certain topics because the less that we know, especially in our communities, the less that we know, the less we care. Like, we don't know about it, we're not going to pay attention to it. And I've always been a person that said, I'm not working in policy. I want to be a social worker. I'm going to school for social work, but not the policy sense. And look at what I ended up doing, policy work. And I realized how much people can shift, especially young people, can shift the dynamics of their communities if they actually pay attention to elections, if they pay attention to who is your assembly member in your district, who is your senator, what do you want to see change in your community, and how are you going to contact them and tell them, like, hey, Roxanne Prasad, I need you to vote on this bill because I want to protect the rent prices in Brownsville. I need you to vote on this bill to protect like this, to protect that. I think that young people need to focus on policy more and understand that your vote definitely does count. I was also one of those people like, hey, like, all right, you guys are voting, so why do I have to? But I really realized that if you don't go out and vote, decisions will be made for you. If you're not actively involved in policy and learning what's going on around you, people are literally making decisions that you have no idea impacts you, and they definitely do. So
we briefly touched on it with the younger participants, but I want to get more into it about how the role of church and faith ties into your activism, if it does.
I would say I separate the two in a sense that I think of church as an reinforcement in my life, organization. It's like asynchronous, it's happening every week. I'm appreciative of it, whether it's online or in person. Faith sincerely plays an integral role in all that I do. As we individuals, yeah, the church might have hurt us, or the church might not be doing so and so for us, but as individuals, where is your faith to say, what change can I positively make? Yeah, you can go to church and rant on about what's not working, or I'm going to brunch, I'm going to go do hot yoga. That's fine. You should. Your personal mental health is important. That is important. But why can't you just do that after service in your own ministry in the church that has space for you to do it? So this is kind of like I know that in marketing for real estate, they always love a third stop. So you got work, you got home, and they love a third stop. So the third stop would be the mall, it would be the movies, and they just love, like the gym, they love a third stop. And for us to have progress, effective progress, I do believe that the church is a great place to start. I do believe that. I strongly believe that. And I do believe that every individual should grow in their faith and their belief. I do believe that.
Like working with the youth, like teaching, like educating the youth, and also like making policies and the different ways people do activism. And we interviewed like a younger person and the older person, so we got two different perspectives, which was really just informative for all of us. And even things we thought we knew, were questioned when we heard like the oral history of like the Brownsville Boys Club, and like the way what we heard it was different from the way the lady told us. So it really makes us question and think deeper about it. So yeah, overall the interviews were very, very informative.
Appreciate you. What was your takeaway from today?
One of my takeaways, at least from today, was that the Brownsville Boys Club has very different viewpoints from different people, obviously of different races and ethnicities. Oral history and written history is very different. And
were you surprised by anything during the interviews?
Surprised. Same thing about the Brownsville Boys Club, like learning that, because I thought that it was very inclusive to like both races of like boys or all races of boys, but apparently from a person's like viewpoint who's actually there, it wasn't. So yeah.
Is there something that you took away from either of the interviews?
Something that I took away from the second interview is that just because you're young, you can still do a lot of things, and people may not expect you to do a lot of things because you're young. And from the first interview is, even if you're old, you can still be in activism, even if it's not on the front lines of activism.
Speaking to Ms. Taylor Field today.
It felt educational. She taught us a lot that we didn't know about her hometown and about Brownsville and how the school system changed.
What's something that you learned today that you found interesting that you didn't know before?
Today, something that I found interesting today was the piece of advice that we got at the end of the second interview, showing up as yourself. I guess I had this idea that to do activism or to do certain work, you needed to look a certain way or be a certain kind of person. But at the end of the day, like, any of us could affect change as ourselves. It just takes you caring about something enough to step up and do something about it. What was your takeaway from the interviews today?
I think my main takeaway was just how powerful it is for people to share their stories, both across generations and within the same generation. It seemed like there were a lot of great connections people were making. Both the interviewers and the interviewees were getting a lot out of it, and that's the whole point of the program.
I would say my main takeaway is to continue to be a sponge. Like, I felt really, really proud when Miss Taylor called us like, oh, like, we're all sponges and stuff like that. And I want to continue to be that way. I want to continue to have like a healthy dose of curiosity and like just keep absorbing everything. And remember that I have something to learn from like everyone I encounter, and keep that open mind and perspective.